Okay, well, hello everyone. My name is Mark Browage. I'm Director General of the Enterprise Investment Scheme Association. I am joined today by Andrew Noble from Part Equity. Andrew, how are you today?
Hi, Mark. Yep, very well. Thank you. Very pleased to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Anytime, anytime. So look, we're doing a series of these videos trying to give you an idea of kind of tax planning ideas for the end of, obviously, the tax year, 31st of January, and then pushing on into 6th of April. So new tax year, new tax planning ideas. This is a series of videos that you can find on the website, heading into our webinar, starting on the 4th of January for a whole week and series of these videos, of which Andrew will be one of our guests, so you can see him again on there. So look, today I want to carry on discussions we've been having, Andrew, before we came on, actually, around obviously the tax reliefs of EIS and how they work and how they operate. And one of them that we don't talk about very much, but probably should do, so it's good to give it some air today, is carryback. So Andrew, do you want to give us a quick overview of carryback, what it is and how it works with EIS? It's slightly different than it is with pensions. So yeah, perhaps give us a quick overview, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So carryback is a term used which is often linked in with income tax relief. So with EIS, you get 30% income tax relief when you invest into a qualifying company. Carryback is a tool within that which allows you to offset that tax against your prior year income tax liability. So as an example, if you or your client has a tax liability which was incurred in the 1920 tax year, you can continue to make investments in the 20 to 21 tax year and offset that investment, that 30%, against your 1920 tax liability. That is what we mean by carryback.
That's 2019-20, yeah? Could just clarify.
2019-20 through to 2021, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay.
So that means that when you sit down, when you as advisors perhaps sit down with clients, or you as an individual and you're looking at making EIS investments, it's really about this time of year that you start to understand what your tax liability is going to be. And if you're completing a self-assessment tax return, you're going to be submitting it in January. And so it's at that point that you start to think about, well, okay, I've got this tax liability. How can I think about ways in which to mitigate my tax, and how can I invest in EIS, for example, as a way of doing that? And that really gives you, at this point in the year, around about sort of 4 or 5 months to make EIS qualifying investments to take advantage of carryback.
And it's important to note that EIS is also a tax reducer, isn't it? So it is the final chunk of the money that comes off the tax bill. That's why it's so important in that sense.
Exactly. And then if you were to make an investment on the 6th of April or onwards, then obviously you cannot offset that against your 1920 tax liability. So you cannot bring it back at all, and that opportunity is then lost.
Yes, which is a good point, because you can only carry back for 1 year, can't you? You can't go back beyond that 1 year. I think pension tax relief is slightly different. You can go back 1 or 2 years. My financial planning knowledge letting me down, but yeah, but it's only 1 year for an EIS, isn't it? Yeah, exactly, there is a small window of opportunity in that sense.
So there is a small window of opportunity, and obviously with the time lag, as I mentioned, with the time lag of eventually working out what you, or if you're an advisor, what your client's position looks like, you won't necessarily know that until about November, December time, and then you only have that five-month window to make decisions on how to invest in EIS to take advantage of that carryback facility.
Absolutely. So you say it is quite a small window of opportunity, 5 months there. I know you have an idea or a proposal come up to extend that and making carryback for 2 years. So do you want to talk us through that quickly?
Yeah, so there's some thinking behind this, where we sort of PAR are trying to put our shoulder behind a proposal to increase carryback from 1 year to 2 years. And the reason for that is just to smooth out the way that EIS carryback works as a system for many stakeholders in the industry, actually. So I will talk through sort of each of the stakeholders and how it might benefit them by increasing carryback from 1 to 2 years. So if you are a financial advisor and you advising your clients on perhaps using EIS, by increasing carryback from 1 to 2 years, what this means is that you will be able to make a recommendation to your clients without having deployment pressure. So you'll be able to have a conversation with your clients in November through to January, perhaps even after January, maybe even February after they've completed their self-assessment tax return. And you'll be able to say to them, look, no longer is it 2 months that we need to get your investment deployed into 8 companies to make sure you've got diversification. actually what we have now is anything between 14 and 17 months in order to get you invested into EIS. And that means that you're likely to have more companies that you invest into. So you're going to have greater portfolio diversification. And also it means that hopefully the types of companies that you're investing into are going to be of better quality, because there's not a rush to get that money out of the door.
Yeah.
If you're the client of the advisor, if you're an individual, that's also good news, because from your own personal perspective, it means that hopefully your money is going to be deployed across more companies, so greater diversification for you as the client, and also again hopefully higher quality opportunities, because you have a longer period of time for the managers to make that investment selection. As entrepreneurs in the industry, advisors may or may not know this, but there is a very strange seasonality with EIS and the way it operates, particularly with EIS fund managers. Because carryback is limited to 1 year, there is a wall of capital that tends to come into the market between December to the end of March. And it all has to be deployed in that period in order to take advantage of carryback. From an entrepreneur's perspective, that is actually not an efficient deployment of capital into companies around the UK. And often entrepreneurs are left sort of scratching their heads, wondering why the EIS market is quite barren between April to November, and why between January and March there is a lot more capital available for their companies. And often what that means is that companies have to consider their fundraising roadmap as a result, and that's not healthy for the system. And often they're told by managers that there'll be drip-fed cash into their companies as well, which is also not a good way to manage your business. Finally, from a manager's perspective, and if we're thinking selfishly about it, we at PAR, we have a very cautious and conservative way in which we like to invest money into companies. We want to make sure we're always finding the very best opportunities. And therefore, we tend to turn money away if we don't feel as though we can deploy it by the end of the tax year, because we want to make sure we're investing in the very best opportunities. And if we don't feel like we can do that for our clients, then we end up turning money away. And that's not a good use of our time either. We want to make sure that we're sort of investing into the right companies, and we want to be doing that all year round rather than necessarily being hamstrung by an artificial deadline.
Yeah, makes absolute sense. I just think from an investor's point of view, if you're taking longer to deploy, would that mean it takes them longer to get their tax relief back, or didn't have no effect in that sense?
Well, I suppose it will smooth out over time, because for the first year, yeah, you're absolutely right. It will mean that it will take them longer to get all their tax certificates because it will be spread out over a longer period of time. But of course, if you're doing it on an annual basis, then eventually it will smooth itself out. Generally speaking, I think the benefits certainly outweigh that potential concern.
Yeah, I guess I say it'll eventually catch itself up, won't it, and smooth itself out, and maybe for the first year you'll be slightly behind, but it'll definitely catch itself up in that sense. Okay, carryback covered, brilliant. Thank you very much. You mentioned the D word in there as well, diversification.
Yeah,
do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I know, again, for a lot of advisors at this time of year, they're looking at their portfolios, whether it's pensions or ISAs or EIS, and looking how they can rebalance, move things around. And obviously, there's a lot going on in the world at the moment as well. Do you want to talk about what kind of PAR's approach to diversification is?
Yeah, absolutely. So we get a lot of calls from advisors just now looking for deployment by the end of the tax year or perhaps further beyond. And so this time of year, we're typically having the conversation with advisors to say, look, we would love to deploy all of your cash by the end of the tax year. We typically look at 8 companies. So if we get a subscription into our ES fund, we'll say, right, a good amount of diversification for a subscription is probably around about 7 or 8 companies. That means that we're being very selective over the types of companies that we invest into, but it gives you a reasonably broad selection and good sort of portfolio diversification within that. At this time of year, we actually reduce that. So we tell advisors, look, we can deploy your money by the end of the tax year, but we'll only be able to do it into 3 or 4 companies. So you will have some diversification, but you won't get as much diversification as your client perhaps would want. And indeed, we send them a risk warning to that effect as well, that there is the potential for portfolio concentration. What we also advise managers to do is say, look, if it helps, what you should consider is actually building out an EIS fund portfolio towards 30 companies. So portfolio theory, comes into play, whether it's your listed equities or your unlisted equities. And so it very much applies to EIS too. And so what we'll suggest to advisors is to say, look, if you are looking for accelerated deployment by the end of the tax year, that will give you 3 or 4 investments through the PAR EIS fund. However, you may also want to consider reinvesting in the PAR EIS fund in the new tax year to increase that portfolio diversification. And or you may want to look to other managers as well to spread your capital across other managers to ensure you get that portfolio diversification, but also that manager diversification too as well. And I think that's important from an advisor or an investor standpoint.
I can't believe you're promoting other funds and people to look at other funds.
I think honestly, I think it's the right thing to do. So we're always happy to have an honest conversation with advisors if it's in their best interest.
And on that point of diversification and putting money with other fund managers, I was talking to someone the other day, I can't remember who it was, but they made a good point that actually they tell clients not to diversify across necessarily fund managers, or you will need it to do that, but actually you should diversify across investee companies. So let's say in your portfolio, using an example, you could probably give me a better one, but there's 2 or 3 delivery box outfits in there, and then you go to 3 or 4 other managers and they've got 2 or 3 delivery box companies in there. All of a sudden you've got 8 delivery box companies in your portfolio, but you're not that you necessarily chose to, or whether that is a good or bad sector, we don't know. But by coincidence, you have concentrated your portfolio accidentally. So is that a good theory or bad theory? I'm just trying to play it out really.
Well, it depends. And look, it does get a bit more complicated because sometimes 2 EIS fund managers might be investing in the same company. So there is that potential, and that's something that you've got to be alive to. However, what I would say is that generally speaking, you have to understand what the manager's investment focus is. So if you take PAR Equity as an example, our focus is on the north of the UK. So immediately, if you're thinking about EIS, what PAR provides you is geographical diversification. And actually, it's increasingly unlikely that we'll be co-investing with many of the other EIS fund managers based in the Southeast.
Yeah.
That's the first point to stress. The second is in terms of your investment thesis. And we at PAR tend not to do that much in terms of consumer-facing tech, and instead we focus much more on deeper tech, enterprise tech, health tech, industrial tech. And in that way, and also we look at slightly more mature companies. So on average, the companies that we invest into are probably achieving monthly revenue of about £70,000. So they're getting towards 1 million revenue run rate. So as an advisor, you should be thinking about, okay, manager A is looking at more mature companies, based in the north, and there's a sort of stage and also investment focused diversification there. Manager B might be focused on university spinouts, and that might be across the whole of the UK, or it might be in the Southeast, for example. And manager C might be much later stage, right? So it might be much later stage investments, in which case I know that if I invest across these 3 managers, I can actually get pretty good portfolio diversification within my 3 subscriptions.
Yeah, so it's worth your while as an advisor, kind of looking around the market and see who's investing where and what their investment thesis is in that sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Final question, because we're trying to keep these videos kind of short and punchy. I could speak to you all day about many things, I'm sure, but just to try and keep it as short and punchy as possible. We've seen kind of, in the advisors' portfolios, in their pensions, their ISAs, we've seen kind of a bit of a move towards earlier stage investments and funds and unit trusts and OICs, et cetera, And obviously, I guess the most famous one is Woodford, who kind of moved into our realm a little bit with what he was trying to do with his patient capital fund, and obviously it all kind of blew up and went wrong, et cetera. And he's obviously a star fund manager in kind of the IFA world and financial planning world. So, in terms of what the role you guys have with working with companies, could you just let us know a little bit about how active you are with companies, what role you play with those companies, how are you there day to day? Is it once a year? Yeah, just give us a flavour of how much you do.
Well, I think first and foremost, we've been investing in early stage companies for a very, very long time. So PAR Equity itself was started in 2008. We individually, we've got sort of collectively nearly 100 years of EIS qualifying experience. We've made 240 EIS qualifying investment rounds into companies. So bags of experience in this space. With regards to whether we're active or passive with our portfolio companies, we are very active. So we tend to lead the majority of our investments into companies. So the majority of those 240 rounds we've led. we've structured the deal, we've brought in third-party money, and then when we invest into them, we always take an investor director position and also a board observer right as well. And that's important in order to keep a cadence on the companies, to make sure they're going in the right direction, and also making sure they're getting the right advice to grow the business. And a key, and I know you wanted me to keep it short, sharp, and punchy, but a really key piece of the puzzle for us is our wider network. So what we tend to do is pull in key individuals who are the right people at the right time to turbocharge our portfolio. And that's been a key element of our investment thesis, which is why we're achieving the sorts of returns that we're achieving, and we're outperforming the market dramatically in terms of realized performance to investors.
So and exits as well at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. We've now realized 22 companies. Our returns are 3.7 times money and a 27% IRR before any tax relief at all. So these are market leading returns. If you look at average returns for VCs in the UK, it's about 13%. In the US, it's about 15%. So we're well outperforming the market. And that is because of our active hands-on role that we take with our portfolio companies.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. It sounds like an excellent place to finish. So thank you for, I say, we kept it short and punchy, and hopefully that's worked out for everyone watching. If you are watching before we've done our series of webinars, hopefully you'll see Andrew on a couple of those panels during the week. If you're watching it afterwards, then yeah, please do pick up the recordings and check through those as well. But thank you very much to everyone. Thank you very much for Andrew for joining me today. We'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone.